Hey church, do you remember the Rejoice series from last year? We need to remember to stay calm. And remember what the acronym was? We need to celebrate God. So think about things that he has done for you. And like for me, the celebrate just reminds me I need to be grateful for all the things he's ever done for me. And I just need to celebrate the love of God. We need to ask him about anything. You could ask him, you need to ask him for hope. You need to ask him for courage. You need to ask him for things like that. He's not just going to walk up to the door and hand you some hope and hand you some courage and hand you some money and hand you cars and stuff. No, you're not really going to just ask him for a car and, it's going to happen. But you just got to ask him for the things that you need, because that's what he's here for. He loves you. We need to leave it with him. Whenever we ask him, we leave it with him. We can't take it back, as Hunter has said before. We can't just walk back over there and, take it back and just walk away and be like, oh, I'll handle it on my own. No, you're not going to handle it on your own. That's something that probably won't happen. So you have to leave it with him. Then you need to meditate. You need to pray on it. You need to worship. And then you just need to love God and just be happy and go share your love with other people, as Pastor Kelly used to say. Speaking of Pastor Kelly, he loved people so much. Back whenever he was still here, he used to walk up to me and many others and just put his hands on your shoulders and just say, God loves you. Jesus loves you. And he couldn't express that anymore. He is so much. And he was just a fraction of God's love. God loved us so much. He died on a cross for us. He gave us so much. So, out of everything, yes, we need to worship him. Thank you. Let's worship.
Your love so great, Jesus, in all things. I've seen a glimpse of your heart a billion years. Still I be singing. How can I praise you enough? How can I praise you enough? You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, but nothing else compares. Creation calls all to the Savior. We are alive for your praise in earth and sky. No one is higher. Our God, wonders you reign. Oh God, wonders you reign. You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, but nothing else compares. You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, but nothing else compares. Us, but to your name we lift up all praise. praise, not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise, not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise, not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise. You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, when nothing else compares. You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, when nothing else compares. Not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise, not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise, not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise, not to us, but to your name. We lift up all praise. You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, what nothing else compares. You are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean, but nothing else compares. Jesus, 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 just that name. Jesus, 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 just that name. Yours will be the only name that matters to me, the only one whose favor I seek, the only name that matters to me. Yours will be the friendship and affection I need to feel my Father smiling on me, the only name that matters to me. Yours is a name that has saved me. Your mercy and grace, the power that forgave me. Your love is all I've ever needed. Yours will be the only name that matters to me, the only one whose favor I seek, the only name that matters to me. Yours will be the friendship and affection I need to feel my Father smiling on me, the only name that matters to me. Yours is a name that has saved me. Your mercy and grace, the power that forgave me. Your love is all I've ever needed. Wake up in the land of glory with the saints, I will tell my story. There will be one name that I proclaim. will be the friendship and affection I need. Feel my Father smiling on me, the only name that matters to me. 'Cause yours is a name that has saved me. Your mercy and grace, the power that forgave me. Your love is all I've ever needed. When I wake up in the land of glory with the saints, I will tell my story. There will be one name that I proclaim. When I wake up in the land of glory with the saints, I will tell my story. There will be one name that I proclaim. Jesus, 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 just that name. Jesus, 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 just that name. When I wake up in the land of glory with the saints, I will tell my story. There will be one name that I proclaim. When I wake up in the land of glory with the saints, I will tell my story. There will be one name that I proclaim. Jesus, 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 just that name.
You were the Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. We didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. Death could not hold you, the veil torn before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave. The Yours is the kingdom, yours is the glory, yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a powerful name it is. Nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus.
Give thanks to the God of gods. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. Give thanks to the God of heaven, for his steadfast love endures. You say you'll never leave us nor forsake us, and I believe it. And if we ask for anything in your name, we'll achieve it. I know that I will reap whatever it is I sow. So feed me some of that living water so this mustard seed can grow. My hands stretched to the heavens. I'm crying, Lord, I'm shouting. I know you're there and I know you care. Lord, help me move this mountain. I was drowning in my misery, now I'm swimming in your grace. The victory is yours, but you gave me a little taste. I was headed to the grave, you turned me around. About face, your name alone sends demons back to their dwelling place. The King of Kings, the Prince of Peace, putting me together piece by piece. Praising and praying, I'm praying and praising, I shall never cease. I was dead in my sin, you're the only thing that lasted. So I called on you, Jesus, cause your name opens caskets.
No equal, now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the glory, yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a powerful name it is. Nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus.
Man, I love ice cream. It's so good. Like, it is so good. I love just how cold it is when it goes in. As soon as it hits your lips, it's just like, man, this is amazing. Don't you love ice cream? I just love it. I know right now it's chaotic times and people are angry and they're antsy. They're ready to get back to things the way they used to be. They're sending out stimulus checks, but I'm telling you, it would help us out if they just sent out some stimulus ice cream. It'd cool us all off and make us happy again. That would be great. I love ice cream. You love ice cream. But our love for ice cream, I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably nothing compared to my father-in-law's love for ice cream. I've shared this story with a couple of you on a one-on-one basis. My father-in-law loves Bluebell ice cream. I remember one time I was in his house and opened up his freezer, and there were 6 half-gallon containers of Bluebell ice cream just sitting there. I have 3 at my house, and I think I'm doing something with my life. No, he had 6 at one time. I remember one particular instance, he said, Zach, I need you to go out to the back and grab something out of my secret stash. And I'm like, well, what does this mean? You know, every guy has a secret lair somewhere in their house, and his happened to be at the back of his property in his work shed. Go in there, and there's a freezer in there. I open it up, and there are 16 half-gallon containers of ice cream. So that means at any given time, he has 22 containers of ice cream. That's an insane amount of love for ice cream, right? That is an unwavering, deep love for ice cream. And the thing is that our relationship with Jesus, our love for Jesus should be the exact same way. That where Jesus is just overflowing out of us. Anywhere you look, you just see Jesus. You go out to the shed, you go out to the back, Jesus. Jesus should be everything our lives are about. And when I begin to look at the Bible, man, someone that should be at the top of the list for their love of Jesus is the Apostle Peter, right? I mean, when Jesus was asking the disciples, who is everybody saying that I am? This is what we see in Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus asks this question, and some of the disciples say, well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And Jesus said, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. I mean, you're talking about Peter who gave up everything to follow after Jesus. He said in Luke 18, he goes, see, we have left our homes and followed you, Jesus. There's no denying how much Peter loved Jesus. And he would spend his whole life telling people about him and his love. And the favor of God, the hand of God was on Peter's life. We see in Acts chapter 5, verse 15, where it says the people, they would even carry out the sick into the streets and lay them on cots and mats, that as Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on some of them. I mean, the hand of God was on Peter's life. I mean, he loved Jesus. According to early church history, Peter was martyred for his love of Jesus. Peter was killed as a result. He never backed down from or recanted from his love of Christ. And not just he wasn't just killed, his wife was killed. He had to watch his wife be killed before him. And he still didn't back down from his love of Jesus. Before being crucified, Peter looked at how he was going to be crucified. He says, you know what? I'm not worthy. I respect Jesus and love Jesus so much. I'm not worthy to be crucified in the same way. So he was crucified upside down. There's no doubt Peter loved Jesus. But he was not the only disciple that loved Jesus. I mean, they all did. I mean, outside of the Apostle John, all of them would be martyred for their faith, either by being beheaded, crucified, lanced, or some other method. They all went to the grave declaring their love of Christ. I mean, even the Apostle John, I mean, he was tortured. He was banished to an island of Patmos because of his love for Jesus. But the reason why I single out Peter is because, man, we can relate to him, right? So easy to relate to Peter. He's such a cool guy. I mean, we were talking about, like, when you read through the Bible and you read about different people, you quickly see your differences from them, right? Last week we talked about Noah and Job, the most righteous men on the planet. I'm not sure about you, but I'm not there. I don't consider myself the most righteous person on this planet. I'm sure you don't think yourself that way either. So it's hard to relate to them. Look at Moses. He had such a one-on-one intimate relationship with God to where he would speak with God and his face would be glowing. It would be radiating the glory of God. I'm not sure how your prayer life looks. I'm not sure what you look like when you come out of your prayer closet. But when was the last time you came out and your family and your friends made you cover your face because you were glowing that much? We don't really relate as much to Moses, right? But then we see in Elijah calls down fire from heaven. Okay, he's raising people from the dead. We're lucky if we get out of bed without any aches and pains, and he's raising people from the grave. Then his protege Elijah is sending 2 bears to maul a bunch of kids over a haircut joke, right? I mean, we are not like these people. And then you get to the New Testament, and you come to the super apostle and Paul. Man, I mean, this is the greatest missionary who ever walked the face of the earth. Yes, I know he said he boasted in his weaknesses, but you don't really ever see him. Yeah, he was this great persecutor of the church. That's really as far as you see into his weaknesses, right? I mean, this is the person that wrote a majority of the New Testament. He was super intelligent. He had an amazing ability at reasoning with people. I mean, he could go toe-to-toe with the greatest scholars in the world. I'm not sure about you, but I know very quickly when I go into a room of scholars, I know very fast that I am not one of them. Paul is a hard person to relate to. But then you get to Peter, my boy Peter, and you quickly say, yeah, I can relate to that dude. Yeah, I get him. I mean, he was described in Acts 4, he was described as an uneducated common man. Now, I'm not calling you uneducated. I'm just saying this is a normal dude. He was a normal guy. Just like you're normal, I'm normal, most of us are normal. He was normal. But he loved Jesus. And what he showed us is that if you have the right heart for Jesus, anything's possible. What he showed us is that God is more concerned about your heart than he is about your IQ. He's more concerned about your love for him than he is about any skills that you may possess. And that was the case with Peter. I mean, that old saying where it says, look, if you have the right work ethic, I can teach you how to do the job. If you have the right personality, I can teach you the necessary skills. In the same way, if your heart is right with God, God is saying, I can mold and transform you to who I need you to be. I can teach you the skills needed. I can teach you how to do the job that I want you to do for me. So that's what I love about Peter. Peter had a heart after God, a heart after Jesus, a heart that all the followers of Jesus should possess. That doesn't mean that Peter didn't have any shortcomings. It doesn't mean that he didn't have failures. Peter was full of failures. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody in the Bible that's spoken about their failures more than Peter. Peter's failures are well documented throughout the Gospels. And I love that. I love that Peter was just known for being a failure. And maybe that doesn't give you the courage that you want or the comfort that you need right now, but it does it for me. Because guys, I fail. I make mistakes, especially ministry-related mistakes. There are so many times where I think, man, that's going to work. That's going to be a hit. And it completely bombs. If I had a penny for every mistake that I've made, at least in ministry-related things, if I had a penny for every mistake, I'd have at least $5, maybe $7. I mean, I've made so many mistakes in my life. But if we truly have the right heart for Jesus, what Peter shows us is that those failures are mere stepping stones to our purpose for God. You know, last week we talked about Joseph. We talked about patience and perseverance and how the Apostle Peter, he says, look, if you make every effort to add to your faith, perseverance, patience, then it's going to prevent you from being ineffective or unfruitful. It's going to prevent you from failing in life, from failing in your purpose. And so what we're seeing right now, that failures also are a result of that if we are getting prepared for our purposes, that even failures are preparing for them as well. And Peter showed us that. So what are some things that we can learn from Peter's failures? And I want to talk about 4 failure titles that Peter was known for and what we can learn from them. Number 1, Peter, he was called the wavering defier of gravity. Have you ever tried to defy gravity? Like, I don't know about you, but I think back in my life and I'm like, how am I still alive? How did I get through that? How did I survive that encounter right there? I used to do some stupid things when I was a kid. I was thinking about one instance in particular with me and my cousin. And for some reason, I don't know what we were trying to do. Maybe we were trying to, our manhood we were trying to prove, or our fearlessness, or just our stupidity. I'm not sure. But we climbed on top of this shed. Now, this was no ordinary shed. It wasn't like this rinky-dink shed. No, it was the size, it was the height of like maybe a typical one-story house. You're talking about a big shed. We climb on top of it, and once we get up there, we push the ladder down, and we said, all right, we have to get down. We have to jump off and be okay. What were we thinking? And I remember I'm sitting there, I'm the oldest, I'm like, okay, let me figure this out. I'll jump to this branch and I'll swing down. I've seen Spider-Man enough. I know how this works. Well, I jump out, I miss the branch, I land flat on my back. I mean, I thought I broke my back. It's safe to say that my attempt at defying gravity was an ultimate failure. But you know, Peter had a defying gravity moment in his life, and it started off promising, but it too led to an ultimate failure. You see where the disciples and Peter, they're out on their boat and they're battling these strong waves, these strong winds, and they don't know what to do. In the midst of all of that, in the middle of the night, they see someone walking on the water. It's Jesus, but they're not really sure. And you know this story. It's a bizarre scene. They're all freaking out. They think it's a ghost. They don't know who that is. And Peter cries out and he says, that's Jesus. And he says, Jesus, if that's you, I want you to let me walk out to you on the water. And so that's where we pick up in Matthew chapter 14, verse 29. Jesus said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water, and came to Jesus. I mean, look at the faith of Peter. He's like, that's Jesus. I'm walking to him. He's walking to him. And then in verse 30, it says this, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, he cried out. Man, in one moment, Peter is doing the impossible with Jesus. He's doing the impossible with Jesus. And literally 1 second later, he's sinking like a rock. His faith is depleted. It's like, you got to be kidding me. It's like, Peter, you were walking on water. You were doing something that was not possible. You were walking on water, and in the middle of walking on water, you're just like, oh, I don't believe anymore. And he starts sinking. But guys, can't we relate to that? Like, to where there are times in your life where it's like you couldn't be closer to God. You were pursuing him. You were walking towards him. You were so hungry for God. And then it's like all of a sudden you're back to square one again. Like you hit some kind of rough patch and the hunger is gone. Your faith depleted. It's dissipated. It's nowhere to be found. It's like I was so close with Jesus. And now it's like I couldn't be further away from him. Haven't we been like that before? And maybe for some of you, you're saying, no, I haven't. You know, I've been looking at this Jesus thing for a while, but I've never completely stepped out of the boat. I've been trying to figure it out, but I'm not 100% sure about it. But you know what, Zach? While I don't understand this Jesus thing, I understand all about sinking. Yeah, I'm laid off. I'm cut off from my family. My kids are driving me insane right now. My spouse and I have never fought this much in our entire life. I don't know if I'm going to pay the bills. Yeah, Zach, I'm not sure about that Jesus thing. Oh, but I know about waves. I know about my feet starting to sink. And I know about those times where I don't know if I'm going to make it out without drowning. So what can we learn from this? What did Jesus teach Peter in the midst of this? And what is he teaching you? You see, Peter didn't know it yet. He didn't know the purpose of his life fully at this point. But what God was showing him is that eventually he was going to be walking in very uncharted waters for his mission on God. He was going to be bringing the gospel to places it had never been, to people who had never heard about God. And God knew that along the way, he was going to experience some hardships. He was going to experience some waves and some winds that would not only rock his boat, but possibly cause him to sink. And in this moment of sinking in Matthew chapter 14, and I was telling this story to my 3-year-old earlier this morning, and he knows this story. He was getting excited about this story because at that moment, that point of sinking for Peter, he realized when I cry out, Jesus reaches out. And so when I'm telling this story to my 3-year-old, and he's like, oh, Peter, he walks on the water. And I get to the part where Peter starts to sink. And it's like Jackson starts like jumping down, like, this is where Jesus reaches out his hand. And he's like, this is where Jesus shows up whenever Peter cries out. And that's what you see in verse 31, where it says, immediately Jesus reaches out his hand and took a hold of him, showing Peter that the things you do in life are not because of you. Peter, the impossible things that you would witness in life, it's because of me. And if you are focused on me, if you are pursuing me, and you have your eyes gazed upon me, you will continue to do the impossible. But when you don't, and church, I'm telling you right now, there will be times that you don't. We all do this. We rely on our own instincts, our own knowledge, our own skills, and think we can do this life on our own. I mean, Peter was walking on water, and then his faith was depleted. There are times where we stop looking at Jesus. And he says, and when that moment happens in your life, if you cry out to me, I will save you. So are we calling out to Jesus when we're drowning? See, so often in life, we're waiting until we're underneath the surface that we reach out and say, Jesus, I need help. But what he's trying to show us is the moment your feet start sinking, call out and I reach out. I love that about this story. See, what this failure taught Peter was that his hope comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Peter was known as the wavering defier of gravity. But the second failure title of Peter was the ill-advised speaker. You ever said something that you instantly regretted? Like as soon as it left your mouth, you're like, oh, let me put that back in. I do this all the time. I mean, I have serious foot-in-mouth disease. Every time I'm speaking, it's like I'll get those eyes from my wife, and she's like, "Don't you dare say that again." Those eyes that I'm talking about. Every wife has them. I make mistakes all the time with the words that I choose to say. I'm sure I'm making some right now. I don't know, but it's like I have foot and mouth disease. But man, Peter takes the cake when it comes to this. He just finished making possibly not just the greatest statement of his life, but maybe the greatest statement of all of mankind. He just finished saying that Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Christ. And Jesus commends him for it. He says, good job. I mean, it's an awesome experience. Peter is probably on cloud 9 right now, walking around like, you heard what Jesus said? Yeah, he said, I said it right. I figured this out. Y'all said he was Jeremiah. You said he was Elijah. Didn't you say he was John the Baptist? You didn't even know what prophet he was. But he said, I was right. I said he was the Christ. He's feeling good. And then Jesus starts talking about his eventual death and his resurrection. And Peter, confident Peter's like, hey, Jesus, I need to talk to you for a second. He pulls him to the side and he rebukes God. He rebukes Jesus. Probably not the best thing to do. He rebukes him. And then Jesus says this infamous statement. We all know this statement in Matthew 16, verse 23, where he says, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. I mean, I'm sure Peter's jaw was on the ground. He went from being on cloud 9 to feeling like he was that big. I mean, imagine he just finished saying one of the greatest statements ever, and now Jesus called him Satan and says, you're a hindrance to me. But what I love here is that you really see the heart of Peter. Because Peter stayed. He didn't leave. And it made me wonder, what would you have done in that situation? If Jesus called you Satan and says, you're a hindrance to me, what would you have done? Chances are it's like, I ain't got time for this. Dude, I've been giving my life for you, and you're going to call me that? You're going to tell me that right now? You're going to correct me like that? I'm gone. And the reason why I say that, guys, is because we've gotten to a time where it has become impossible for anyone to give correction to anyone else. Like, we have to walk around on eggshells, not wanting to offend anyone. Even if they're in the wrong, we don't want to offend anyone because we don't want them to leave. I mean, you see, this is going on everywhere with sermons. Sermons are not talking really about who God is. It's just motivational speeches to keep you in the house. It's like we're more satisfied with maybe collecting the dollar or maybe having a big group of people than we are about the Word of God. And you see, and what Peter was showing us here is that Jesus taught him humility. He taught him how to receive correction. He taught him how to receive criticism and not falter in his faith. We have gotten to a time where we have abandoned that. We've abandoned it. And so what he was teaching him there about his humiliation, about his humility and about correction and critiquing, it reminds me of the statement by, I believe it's Jonathan Edwards, who said, with every criticism, I try to pull the most truth out of it before throwing it out. Where I pull the most truth out of every criticism that comes my way and say, am I focused on the wrong things here before I get rid of it? You know, I was thinking about, this critique of Peter's life. It prepared him for the future. Eventually in Galatians chapter 2, we see where Paul had to confront Peter. Peter was focused on the things of man and not on the things of God. And what happened as a result, Paul confronts him to his face. And again, shouldn't Peter have just left and said, well, I'm done with this. I'm the leader of the church. You have no right to talk to me like that. No, he received that criticism. He received that correction with humility. And then he pursued his relationship with Christ even further. I love that. Criticism and correction is not something that we should flee from. It should be something that we embrace. But humble pie, it ain't like ice cream. It's an acquired taste, right? It takes some time to get used to humble pie. And I remember Pastor Kelly, whenever he was alive, I've shared this with a couple people, like on a personal level sometimes, is that we used to meet every week. Even before I worked at the church, he would come and find me. I was an accountant. He would come and find me at my office, and we would meet at least once a week for about an hour. And we talked about two things. I remember we'd be talking for like an hour and a half. I'm like, Kelly, I'm still on the clock, man. I got to get back to work. But we talked about two things. One is you. He loved you. I mean, you are all he would talk about. we would pray for y'all and just tell stories of what God was doing in y'all's lives and how we need to pray for God to continue to move in your lives. He loved you. And then the second thing he would say is he would give me a criticism. He would give me some type of correction of whatever happened this past week. He would say, hey, this person, you may have offended this person doesn't like what you said, or, you better not speak on this topic anymore, or you definitely better not use that example again. That's going to backfire. He would always give me these different corrections. And I hated it. I mean, I'm honest. I hated it at first. It was terrible. I mean, humble pie is not that delicious of a dish at first. And he wouldn't really say anything else. He would just give it to me and just let me sit on it. But what he taught me through that is he taught me humility. He taught me to receive every criticism and to pull all the truth out of it and to discard the rest. He taught me through humility how to truly love people. And I love that about him. You see, that's what humility does. That's what correction does. It shows you how to love people better. And he taught me to the same way that even if I didn't do something wrong and I still offended someone, that I could look at that person and say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I could look at people the same way Jesus looked at them, with compassion. And that is what correction will do. So now, while I used to hate correction and criticism, I might still walk away and say, I don't want to hear it right now. But it has taught me humility, and it has taught me how to love. And we too need to embrace the corrections that God has given our way. What are you doing with the corrections in your life? Are you even approachable to be corrected? Because Peter was. Peter had the right heart. Peter was the wavering defier of gravity. He was the ill-advised speaker. Number 3, the third failure title of Peter. He was the inappropriate defender. The inappropriate defender. Poor Peter. I mean, he meant right. He did. He meant right. But his execution on things, they didn't always work out. Have you ever been there? It's like you mean well, but what ends up happening is just a disaster in the end. That's what happens. When Jesus is getting arrested, we see in John 18, it says this. It says, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. It's like, all right, Peter, my boy Peter coming through in the clutch. And then Jesus says this to him. He says this in Matthew 26, verse 52. He says, then Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels? It's like, are you kidding me? Like, if I'm Peter, it's like, are you kidding me? It's like, what do I have to do here, Jesus? I stepped out of the boat, and I'm walking on water. Yeah, I kind of stumbled. The waves were big. And then you say, I got this little faith? He's like, here I am. I call you the Messiah. I'm doing all these great things. I'm trying to save you, and I'm telling you I don't want you to die, and you call me Satan in front of everybody. That hurts. And here I am. I'm trying to defend your honor. I cut that guy's ear off in one blow. I think that deserves at least an amen or a high five or something. Are you kidding? But what was Jesus teaching Peter right here? See, number 1, that vengeance belongs to the Lord. That vengeance belongs to the Lord. He's like, Peter, don't you realize that at any moment, I could call down legions of armies down here to defend everything. I could wipe all of this clean, but I'm in control. So why don't you let me be God for a second and trust what I'm doing here? That reminds me of that passage in Romans chapter 12, verse 9, where it says, beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. How are you doing with a verse like that? Are there things in your life, hardships, maybe betrayals, whatever it is, are there things in your life that maybe you need to set them down? And you need to trust that, you know what, God, I know that you love me, and I know that you'll vindicate me, and I'm going to let you do it. And I'm no longer going to continue to hold this grudge or this hatred towards anyone else. I'm putting that in your shoes. I'm going to love them, and I know that you will pay them back. That vengeance belongs to you. So that's the first thing he taught Peter. The second thing is he said, look, Peter, I love your fight, but you're fighting the wrong war. He was teaching him here, Ephesians 6, verse 12, where it says this. It says, look, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against authorities, against the cosmic powers over the present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. He says, look, Peter, I love that you're fighting here. I love that you got this energy, but you're fighting with the wrong tools, man. You got this iron sword. That's not going to do anything. He says, no, you got to put on a different type of armor. He says, first off, you got to get this belt. This belt of yours is the belt of truth. It keeps you from being exposed. He said, I need you to put on a breastplate. I need you to protect your heart with righteousness. You see, this breastplate of righteousness, it protects your heart from the flesh of the world, from the sin of the world. He says, I need you to put on your shoes of the gospel of peace. Your shield is your faith. You look at me, you focus on me, you trust in me, and that will protect you from the flaming darts of the enemy. That will protect you from the waves over here and the wind coming from that direction. You hold up your shield of faith. He says, I want you to put on your helmet of salvation. You know, when an enemy comes against you, that fatal blow is to the head. And he says, and that's what the enemy does. He tries to tell you that you are hated, that you are you're wretched, that you're forgotten about. And what God is trying to say is like, no, your salvation, what it tells you is that you are chosen and that you are loved. So put on that protection of that helmet. And he says, and that sword is not an iron sword. It's not a metal sword. No, you fight with the sword of the Spirit, and that's the word of God. He says, that's the kind of war we're getting into. And church, I got to let you know right now, it might look like different wars are going on, but the war you got to start fighting is with the armor of God. So put it on. Get in the word of God. Get the gospel of peace. Trust in your salvation. Put up that shield of faith. Put on the breastplate of righteousness. And yes, wear that belt of truth. We need to be like Peter and put on the armor of God. And then the fourth failure statement, and we're going to wrap up here. The fourth failure statement of Peter, the denier of God. So before I wrap up here, I just want to kind of point something out to you. You know, in Mark 16, when Jesus had risen from the grave, it talks about how these women went out to the tomb to find Jesus, and he wasn't there. And there's this angel there, and he says, look, I know why you've come to find Jesus, but he's not here. He rose from the grave just like he said he would. And so they go in, and they're kind of confused, and then they say, okay, now the angel goes, I want you to go and tell the disciples and Peter. That's an interesting phrase, right? Go tell the disciples and Peter. Why did he single him out? And this is what I love about God. This is what I love about the gospel message, is that he says, look, go tell the disciples and Peter. This is why I'm singling him out. If you remember a couple chapters earlier, Peter had just finished telling Jesus, look, I love you. I love you so much. I would do anything for you. And Jesus says, look, man, I'm just going to tell you, you're going to deny me. And Peter's like, no way. There's no way I would ever deny you. I would die with you, Jesus. I would always be with you. Don't you dare say that I would deny you. And Jesus is like, Peter, I'm sorry, man. There's no way. You're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. Peter's like, there's no way. I don't believe it. That's what Peter says to him. So after Jesus gets arrested, it says that all the disciples fled except for Peter. Again, showing you the heart that he had for Jesus, the love that he had for him. He's like, no, I'm pursuing him. And he goes after him, but whenever he gets into the city, people start to confront him, and he ends up denying Jesus. And in one of the Gospels, it actually says that when he denied Jesus for that 3rd time, that Jesus looked at him at that moment like, I told you, man. And it says Peter just ran off crying. And Jesus was crucified. I mean, who do you think felt worse in that moment? I mean, out of all the disciples, who do you think felt worse? Peter, the one who says, no, you're the Christ, you're the Messiah. I'll stand up and declare it in front of anybody. Peter, the one who walked on water. Peter, the one who defended Jesus by cutting off somebody's ear. Peter, who said, I would die with you, is suddenly nowhere to be found. He ran off. He's disappointed. He's got his head down, probably saying, I don't even want to be one of the disciples anymore. And I love it when Jesus rises from the grave, he says, look, I want you to go tell the disciples, and I want you to tell Peter. You know, Peter probably thinks, I don't want anything to do with him anymore. Yeah, he failed me. He made a lot of failures. He made a lot of mistakes. He betrayed me. He denied me. And he's probably wallowing right now thinking, I don't want anything to do with him. And so I want you to go tell the disciples, but I also want you to tell Peter. You see, if you just go and tell the disciples, Peter's going to say, oh, he's not talking to me because I've done way too many bad things in my life. And he says, no, I want you to tell Peter specifically that I still want him. And the reason why I love that story is because, man, we can relate to that. Many of us can relate to this story of Peter. Where, at some point in our life, maybe we had a Christian upbringing in high school or in college, or maybe even when you were a kid, and you said, I'll follow Jesus. I would die for Jesus. And you said, I'm going to live this godly life. I'm going to have a godly marriage, a godly family. We're going to serve God together. I'm going to do all these right things. But you know what? Your life didn't really turn out that way, did it? It wasn't like you intended. Or maybe you gave your life at some service or some camp or some concert or some church or some Easter service. And you said, you know what? I'm done with that old life. I'm going to guide my family towards God. I'm through with the addictions. I'm through with the lies. And then you went right back to that life that you promised that you'd never go back to. To where anytime you walk into a church, it's just like you just feel shame. Anytime you look at your Bible, you just feel guilty. Whereas I don't even want to speak to God anymore. Yeah, it's one thing to never believe in Jesus, but I did that at one time. Now, I said I would even die for him at one time. And then I ditched him. And so I just feel guilt and shame. And what I love about the resurrection story is that God is saying, look, I want you to tell everyone about me, but I really want you to tell that person. I really want you to tell him. I want you to tell her. I want you to tell you. I want you to know that, yeah, you might have turned your back on me. You might have ran from me, but I still want you. That it's an amazing thought right now that God in heaven right now is going after you. And it's the very reason why you're watching this today. So what did Jesus teach Peter through this failure? He taught Peter that if God can forgive him, a man who made all these promises to God and failed, a man who said that he would deny and that he would die for Jesus and deny Jesus basically to his face, he's saying, look, if God can forgive someone like Peter, he can forgive anyone and save anyone, including you, including your failures. You see, God took this failure and he ended up saving 3,000 people with it in one day. God took the testimony of this failure and he changed the world. And God wants to take the testimony of your failures and continue to change the world. What is God telling you right now through your failures? You see, whatever it is, whatever your failures may be, whatever the shortcomings may be, he tells you, I want you to rejoice always. I want you to pray continually. And I want you to give thanks in all circumstances, even in your failures, because that's my will for you. See, what God is more concerned about, he's not as concerned about your mistakes as he is about your heart. If your heart is right, see, you're going to make mistakes in life. You're going to fail. You're going to come up short in a lot of times. You know, there are going to be times where you might do something impossible and then your faith just gets depleted. There are going to be times where you're going to say the wrong thing, you're going to do the wrong thing, and you may even deny him. And he says, you know what? If your heart is right, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. I love you, church.